My brother called it a family decision. That's what he said when I drove up to the lake house and found my fishing gear piled on the dock like someone had emptied a storage unit. A family decision. 41 years of marriage, 32 years of paying property taxes on that land, and my younger brother and his wife had made a family decision about it while I was 3 hours away getting a knee replacement. I sat in my truck for a long moment before I even turned off the engine. The dock looked wrong from a distance, cluttered in a way it never was because I kept that dock the way I kept everything. Clean, organized, each rod in its sleeve, each tackle box latched. What I was seeing didn't register at first. My brain kept trying to reframe it as something else. Maybe he was cleaning out the storage shed. Maybe he was reorganizing. Then I saw my grandfather's rocking chair sitting in the gravel beside the propane tank, and I understood. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. I need you to subscribe to this channel and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. Because the story I'm about to tell you is the kind of thing you think only happens to other people. The chair had been in our family since 1951. My grandfather built it himself from white oak, heat cut and dried on his own property in western Tennessee. When he died, he left it to my father. When my father died, he left it to me, the oldest son. It wasn't worth anything to an antique dealer. The finish was worn down to bare wood on the armrests, and one of the back spindles had been repaired with a wooden dowel. But it was mine, in a way that almost nothing else in this world was mine. I climbed out of my truck. My knee was still swollen from the surgery, and I moved slowly across the gravel with my cane, each step deliberate. The morning air smelled like pine and lake water, the way it always smelled up here, the smell I'd been looking forward to for the entire 3-week recovery at my daughter's house in Columbus. My fishing rods were laid across the dock railing without their sleeves. The graphite on 2 of them was already showing scratches from contact with the metal rail. The tackle boxes were open and had been gone through, contents shuffled around like someone searching for something specific. This is not an accident. The thought arrived quietly, the way terrible things often do. I walked to the front door and tried my key. It turned halfway, caught, stopped. I tried again. Same resistance. Different lock, same door. They changed the locks to my own lake house. I stood on the porch I'd rebuilt with my own hands in 2009, looking at a door I'd hung myself. Behind a lock I hadn't chosen. The lake was visible through the tree line, still and silver in the morning light, completely indifferent to what was happening on this particular patch of ground. My phone showed no missed calls. I dialed my brother's number. 4 rings, then voicemail. His voice, cheerful and recorded, telling me to leave a message. It's me. I'm at the lake house. My key doesn't work, and my gear is on the dock. Call me back right now. I tried his wife next, straight to voicemail, without ringing. Either her phone was off, or she saw my name and declined. I lowered myself carefully onto the porch steps and looked out at the driveway, the dock, the pile of my belongings. 72 years old, 3 weeks out of surgery, sitting on steps I owned in front of a lock I didn't recognize. The nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile down the road, a retired schoolteacher named Hank who had been coming to this lake for 20 years. I drove slowly down the gravel road and knocked on his door. He answered quickly, which told me he'd probably seen my truck go past. His expression, when he saw my face, was the expression of a man who already knew something he wished he didn't. "Something's going on up at the house," I said. "My key doesn't fit." Hank looked past me toward the road, then back at my face. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Your brother was up here last week, him and Renata. They had some fellas with them. Looked like they were doing work on the place." "What kind of work?" "Couldn't say for certain, but they changed the door hardware, I noticed that. Both doors." He paused. "I figured you knew about it." "I did not know about it." The silence between us carried everything neither of us said out loud. "You're welcome to use my phone if yours isn't working," he offered, "or sit a spell." "I appreciate that. I'll manage." I drove back to my property and sat in my truck with the engine running for heat. My knee throbbed. I'd been cleared to drive just 2 days ago, and the 3-hour trip up from Columbus had already pushed my tolerance. Now I was sitting in my own driveway, locked out of my own house, with my grandfather's rocking chair sitting in the gravel. I called my daughter in Columbus. She answered on the second ring. "Dad, did you make it okay? How's the knee?" "I made it. Listen, I need to ask you something without you panicking." A pause. That's a sentence that always makes me panic. "Did your uncle say anything to you about the lake house?" Longer pause. "He called me about 2 weeks ago. He said there were some family things being sorted out, and that you should probably talk to him when you were feeling better. I thought he just meant, I don't know, I thought it was something minor." "It was not something minor. I'll call you back," I said. I had the folder in the back seat, the one I always traveled with. Medical records, insurance cards, and out of old habit from 40 years of self-employment, property documents. Deed, tax records. The original survey from 1987. I pulled it out and sat there reviewing papers I hadn't looked at in years. The property had come to me in 1994, when my parents passed within 8 months of each other. My father had a will. He was specific about it. The lake house and the 22 acres surrounding it went to me, the oldest son, with the understanding that the family would always have access to gather there. My brother Leonard had received the house in Knoxville in a cash settlement for my father's small life insurance policy. At the time, Leonard had agreed this was fair. He'd signed the paperwork. What my father could not have anticipated was what 30 years of resentment does to a person who convinces himself he was cheated. I'd seen it building in small ways over the years. The comments at Thanksgiving about how lucky I was to have the lake house. The jokes that weren't quite jokes about how much the land was worth now, with the new development going in across the water. His wife Renata had been especially pointed about it these last few years. "Must be nice," she'd say, whenever the lake house came up. "Some people just land on their feet." I'd let it go every time. He was my brother. You make allowances for family. I found out later that they'd been talking to a real estate attorney for almost a year. My phone rang. It was Leonard. "Hey." His voice was careful, measured. The voice of a man who had rehearsed this conversation. "I figured you'd be up there by now." "You figured right. You want to tell me why my key doesn't fit?" A breath. "Look, we need to talk. This has been a long time coming. Renata and I have been doing a lot of thinking, and we've talked to some people, and we think the property arrangement from Dad's will was fundamentally unfair. I got a house in a neighborhood that's gone down in value. You got lakefront property that's tripled. We think it needs to be rebalanced." "Rebalanced? Don't say it like that. You know what I mean. We're not trying to take anything from you. We just want what's fair. Leonard, you changed the locks on my house. We're staying up there while this gets sorted out. It's family property." "It is not family property. My name is on the deed. My name alone." Another breath, and then Renata's voice in the background, a sharp whisper I couldn't make out. Leonard's tone shifted slightly, hardened. "The will can be contested. We've been told there are grounds. Dad wasn't fully competent in his last year, and there's a question about undue influence. We're not going anywhere, and we'd appreciate it if you'd give us some time to figure this out without making it into a big drama." I looked out through the windshield at my grandfather's rocking chair sitting in the gravel. "You put that chair outside," I said. It was taking up space. I hung up. I sat there for a while. The lake was still visible through the trees. That same silver quiet. A loon called from somewhere out on the water. Once, then again, then nothing. 41 years of working, 32 years of maintaining that property, paying insurance, paying taxes, patching the roof, replacing the dock boards when they rotted, clearing the driveway after ice storms when I was the only one who ever came up here in winter. Leonard had visited maybe a dozen times in 30 years. His kids had come up a few summers when they were young. Renata had complained about the mosquitoes every single time. And now, It needed to be rebalanced. I picked up my grandfather's rocking chair from the gravel and put it carefully in the back seat of my truck. Then I pulled out of the driveway and headed toward town. The drive back into Millbrook took about 20 minutes. It was a small enough place that people still knew each other, which had its advantages. The county courthouse was open until noon on Thursdays, and I had 35 minutes. The county clerk recognized me from years of coming in to pay property taxes in person. The old-fashioned way my father had done it, and I'd kept doing it. She pulled up the records quickly. Everything was exactly as I remembered. The property was registered solely in my name. No liens, no encumbrances, no joint ownership of any kind. I asked her to print a certified copy. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Working on it," I said. I called my daughter from the parking lot. "I need the name of a good property attorney, someone who handles real estate disputes." She had one within 10 minutes. A woman named Claire Ashworth in the county seat, 40 minutes east. I called the office and explained the situation to the person who answered. She put me through to Ashworth directly. I told her the facts, without editorializing. Property in my name. Brother and wife changed locks and are occupying the house. Brother is claiming the will was invalid due to incompetence. "Do you have documentation of your father's capacity at the time the will was executed?" she asked. "He had a physical the month before. His doctor's notes were thorough, and the will was witnessed and notarized by people who knew him well. And you have the original deed and tax records in your name? Certified copies in my hand right now. Mr. Seventimianu per Pearl." She paused. "I'd like you to come in this afternoon if you can." I drove 40 minutes east with my knee throbbing and my grandfather's rocking chair in the back seat. Claire Ashworth was direct in the way that good attorneys are, without comfort or drama, just information delivered with precision. She reviewed my documents with the unhurried attention of someone who understood that haste makes errors. "Your brother has no legal standing here," she said. "The will contest claim is almost certainly without merit. A will can only be contested within a specific window after probate closes, and that window has been closed for nearly 30 years in your case. Your property rights are unambiguous. What your brother and sister-in-law have done by changing the locks constitutes unlawful entry and trespassing. Unlawful entry on my own property. On your property, yes. You have several options. You can involve law enforcement immediately, which would result in their removal today. You can give them notice to vacate with a deadline and pursue civil action if they refuse. Or," she paused, "you can make decisions about the property that make their presence there irrelevant to your long-term interests." I looked at her. "What kind of decisions?" She folded her hands on the desk. "The property is worth considerably more than it was when your father passed. With the new development across the lake, waterfront parcels in that area are moving quickly. If you chose to sell, your brother and sister-in-law would have no legal right to remain, and no claim to any proceeds." The number she cited for current market value was one I had to ask her to repeat. I asked her to recommend a real estate agent. I spent 2 more hours in that town. I met with the agent Ashworth recommended, a man named Joe Pfeiffer, who'd sold lakefront property in the county for 20 years. He pulled comparable sales on his tablet and showed me what had moved in the last 18 months. The numbers were real, and they were significant. By 4 in the afternoon, I had signed a listing agreement. Joe asked about the current occupants. I told him they were unauthorized and would be receiving notice to vacate. He noted it professionally and moved on. He'd seen this before. I called my daughter from the parking lot of the real estate office. "Dad," she said slowly. "Are you sure? The lake house has been in our family. Your uncle made a decision about what the family meant to him when he changed those locks. I'm responding accordingly." A long pause. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing right now. I'll keep you posted." I found a motel on the highway, the clean and unremarkable kind that exists in every mid-size American town. Room 112. A queen bed, a desk, a window that faced the parking lot. I set my grandfather's rocking chair beside the window, because there was nowhere else to put it, and because I wanted to see it. I sat in a chair, which creaked in exactly the way it always had, and I looked at the parking lot and thought about my brother. Leonard was 68 years old. We'd grown up sharing a bedroom for 12 years. I'd lent him money twice in our adult lives without ever asking for it back. I'd driven 6 hours to help him move in 2003. I'd been at the hospital when his son was born, and at the funeral when his first wife died, and at the wedding when he married Renata 4 years later. I had shown up every single time he needed someone to show up, and he had spent the last year meeting with lawyers about how to take the one piece of land I had that connected me to our parents. I didn't feel angry, exactly. Anger would have been simpler. What I felt was the particular loneliness of discovering that someone you loved had been somewhere else in their head for a very long time while you weren't looking. I called my attorney and confirmed everything was moving forward. I called Joe and authorized him to schedule showings immediately, regardless of whether the current occupants were cooperative. He told me he could arrange access through proper legal channels if necessary. I told him to do whatever was required. Then I turned my phone to silent. 18 missed calls came in over the next 3 days before I checked it again. 12 from Leonard, 4 from Renata, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably the attorney they'd hired or friends they'd recruited to call on their behalf. The voicemail started with anger, Leonard's voice tight and controlled, telling me to call him back immediately, telling me I was making a mistake, telling me this wasn't finished. Renata's voice sharper, with the particular edge she used when she wanted you to understand that she was not the kind of woman to be ignored. Then the tone shifted. By day 2, Leonard sounded confused. Something about someone coming to the house to look around. Something about whether I understood what I was doing. By day 3, something closer to panic. Gerald, there's a real estate agent bringing people through. What is happening? We live here right now. You can't just call me back, please. I was sitting on the porch of a small rental cabin I'd found through a property management company, 1 county over, a quiet place on a different lake entirely, with a dock and a screened porch and no history attached to it. I'd rented it month to month, which suited me fine. I had good coffee, my grandfather's rocking chair on the porch, and no particular urgency about anything. The first offer on the property came in on day 5. Joe called to walk me through it. Serious buyers, pre-approved financing, willing to close in 30 days. They had kids and wanted to be on the lake before summer. I accepted. Leonard found out through the county property records, which are public, or possibly through Hank down the road, who would have noticed the showing activity. I wasn't sure which, and it didn't matter. He drove to Millbrook and showed up at Ashworth's office, which was how I knew he was serious and also completely out of options. Ashworth called me afterward. He came in person. He wanted to know if there was anything he could do to stop the sale. What did you tell him? That the sale is legal, the listing is valid, and the property is yours to dispose of as you choose. I also told him that if he and his wife are not out of the property within the 10-day notice period, the new owners will pursue their own legal remedies, and he'll be dealing with people who have considerably less goodwill toward him than you do. He called me that evening. I answered, I don't understand how you could do this. His voice was different now. The practiced steadiness was gone. He sounded like he had when we were boys and something had happened that he hadn't expected and didn't know how to absorb. That land is our family's land. It's my land, Leonard. It's been my land for 30 years. Dad would never have wanted this. Dad would never have wanted you to change the locks and put his father's rocking chair in the gravel. I kept my voice even. You made a decision about what family means when you did that. I'm living with your decision. We have nowhere to go. Renata's already upset. We thought we had more time. You've had 30 years of access to that property. You've had my goodwill for 68 years. You decided those things weren't worth respecting. A long silence. I listened to him breathe. Is there anything, he started. No, I said. There isn't. I closed the call and set the phone face down on the porch railing. The lake in front of me was a different lake than the one I'd grown up on. Calmer in the evening light. No history weighing on it at all. A great blue heron stood motionless in the shallows near the dock, waiting with the particular patience that large birds have. The closing took place on a Tuesday morning at a title company in the county seat. The buyers were a couple in their late 30s, the kind of people who asked good questions and shook hands firmly and meant what they said. They had 2 kids who'd apparently been told about the lake house and could not stop talking about fishing. "We've wanted somewhere like this for a long time," the wife said as we signed. "We feel really lucky." "Take care of the dock," I told her. "The boards on the west side need replacing every few years. Don't let it go too long, or it gets into the frame." She wrote it down. That small thing meant something to me that I didn't try to explain. The check represented a number that had seemed abstract until it was in my hands. It wasn't abstract anymore. It was 32 years of property taxes and roof repairs and dock boards and winter driveway clearing. It was my father's intentions and my grandfather's land, converted now into something portable, something no one could change the locks on. I drove back to the rental cabin with the windows down. It was a warm day for that time of year, the kind that surprises you in the upper Midwest, a preview of summer arriving ahead of schedule. The radio played old country music, the kind my father had listened to, and I didn't change it. My daughter called that evening. She'd heard from her uncle, apparently. He'd reached out to her after the closing, looking for a way back in through a side door. "He told me you're being cruel," she said, "that the sale was punishment. The sale was consequence. There's a difference." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Are you okay, Dad?" "Really?" I looked at my grandfather's rocking chair sitting on the rental cabin's porch. Same worn armrests. Same repaired spindle. Still creaking in exactly the same place. "I'm better than I've been in a while," I told her. "I think I forgot for a long time what it felt like to make a decision based on what I actually wanted instead of what someone else expected." She told me she loved me. I told her the same. That night I sat on the porch until the stars came out. No property dispute hanging over me, no obligation to people who had mistaken my patience for passivity, no lock that someone else had chosen on a door I'd built. Leonard would figure out his housing situation. He was 68 years old, with a working vehicle and money in the bank. He'd be fine. He just wouldn't be fine at my expense. I'd spent a lot of years believing that loyalty meant absorbing whatever family pointed at you without complaint. That love was proved by what you were willing to swallow. I'd been wrong about that. Loyalty without accountability isn't loyalty. It's just an arrangement that benefits whoever's doing the taking. The heron was back in the shallows the next morning when I went out with my coffee. Same spot, same patience, same absolute stillness. I stood on the dock for a while and watched it. Not fishing, just watching. There are things that survive the loss of a place. The rocking chair survived. The knowledge of how to read a lake for bass survived. The memory of my father's handwriting on property documents I'd kept in a folder for 30 years survived. And something else survived. Something I hadn't expected. The sense that I was still capable of acting in my own interest. That patience and stability and showing up for people were not the same thing as accepting whatever they decided to hand you. That a man of 72 still had the option of starting the next chapter somewhere. No one had decided things for him. I refilled my coffee and went back inside. If this story resonated with you, I'd appreciate a like and a subscription. Drop a comment and tell me what time it is where you're watching from. And click the box on the left if you want to hear the next one. I've been thinking about what I would have done differently, and honestly, not much. Maybe I would have read the sign sooner. The comments at Thanksgiving. The jokes that weren't quite jokes. Renata sang, "Must be nice." Every single time the lake house came up in conversation, those things were telling me something, and I kept choosing not to hear it, because hearing it meant accepting that my brother had been somewhere else in his head for a long time, while I was still showing up, as if nothing had changed. That's the part that takes the longest to make peace with. Not what Leonard did, but how long it had been building before he did it. People don't change locks on an impulse. They change locks after months of convincing themselves they're justified. The cruelty isn't in the action. It's in the months of quiet calculation. that made the action feel reasonable to them. What I know now, at 72, that I didn't fully understand at 50, is that patience is only a virtue when it's pointed in the right direction. I was patient for 30 years with Leonard's resentment, because I believed patience was what family required. What I was actually doing was making it comfortable for him to keep taking without consequence. Every time I let a comment slide, every time I absorbed the must be nice without responding, I was teaching him that I would absorb whatever came next. I taught him, without meaning to, that my goodwill had no floor. He found the floor when he changed those locks. What surprised me most wasn't that I was angry. It was how clear everything became once I stopped trying to manage his feelings about the situation. I drove to the county clerk. I drove to the attorney. I signed the listing agreement. Each decision took about 20 minutes, and none of them required me to feel ready. They just required me to act on what I already knew to be true. That's something I'd tell anyone who's been where I was sitting that morning in my truck, looking at my grandfather's rocking chair in the gravel. Clarity doesn't arrive before you act. It arrives because you act. The moment I stopped asking what Leonard meant by what he'd done, and started responding to what he'd actually done, everything became simple. Not easy. Simple. The rocking chair is on my porch now. Different porch, different lake, no history on it from anyone who wanted something from me. It creaks in exactly the same place it always did. My grandfather built it to last, and it has lasted through 4 generations and one very long drive in the back seat of my truck past a property that no longer has my name on it. Leonard will be fine. He's 68 years old, with a working vehicle and money saved, and a wife who is very good at convincing herself she deserves things. They'll land somewhere. What I wasn't willing to do anymore was be the place they landed. There's a certain kind of person who mistakes steadiness for weakness, who sees someone showing up consistently and concludes that the showing up is automatic, that it requires nothing, that it will continue regardless of how they behave. Leonard looked at 68 years of me being his older brother, and saw someone who would absorb whatever came next. He was wrong about that. I just took a while to prove it.